Soul Grows in Israel, a podcast where we ask the questions about ancient Jewish wisdom, modern life, and everything in between. So let's ask, let's have fun, and let's grow together. Okay, Jill Kargman, welcome to A Soul Grows in Israel. Jill is an American author, writer, and actress based in New York City's Upper East Side. Her book Momzillas was adapted to the Bravo show that I was obsessed with called Odd Moms Out. But more than all of that stuff, I have to say, as a person living in Israel for the past 15 years, when I scroll on your Instagram and I see someone who lives on the other side of the earth voicing her opinion and fighting hypocrisy, it comforts me. I have to say thank you.
Oh, that's so nice. It's my pleasure. I don't care about the death threats. I feel like I'm getting them from the left and the right. So I know
Mhm.
I'm doing something right. And I've never been one to shy away from expressing my opinions, but particularly when it's not, left versus right, it's right versus wrong. And to me, it's a no-brainer. And I can't believe all these losers have no balls to say, because they're like tiptoeing away from what they think of as controversy when it shouldn't be controversial at all. And a yellow pin should not be thought of as political. It's just like getting kidnapped human beings who are innocent home. To me, I don't see that as something controversial, but I guess all these like spineless losers do.
You know, when you're confident and you don't care what people think, bad things don't happen in the world. And when you are spineless, I think all the horrible things that happen on the planet are not from a bunch of evil people. It's from a few evil people and a bunch of quiet, scared people. And you would be
Right,
on the side of
regular
right.
Germans.
The regular Germans who came home every day and petted their pets. Exactly right. And they just didn't want any trouble. You know, I always used to ask myself, if I was in that era, would I have hit a Jewish family? I don't know. Would I have turned in a Jew for a bag of flour? I would not have. That I can tell you. So I have to
Right.
say, all of these stories were from a different time. All these stories were from history books. And here we are today, living through something that I just never thought I would see with my own eyes. And I don't just mean the horrors. I just mean the strange siding with evil. I'm flummoxed.
It's not even, I mean, yes, you're correct, the siding, but I always think of the Elie Wiesel quote that, the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. I think most people are just indifferent. My
Hmm.
husband and I were talking about this, like so many, when we talk about, and all Jewish people that I know walk around like, oh my God, what a nightmare this world is. We know people who are just like fat, dumb, and happy living their lives. And he said, like, you know, during the genocide in Rwanda, like I think most Americans barely knew what was going on. It
Hmm.
felt like really remote and between like two tribes in Rwanda.
Yeah.
And I think that's how people think of this. It's
Yeah.
like it just feels out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. And, of course, whenever all these like fuck nuts are posting their red hand or wearing the Oscar pins, it's like, really, where's your Sudan one? It's just
Yes.
they don't, it's like no Jews, no news, you
No
know?
Jews, no news. And you know, if people just didn't care, I get that. It's what you're describing. It's like why would you want to go there with that? And I know it's the minority of people. It's just a strange time to be alive. I feel like we're living through history as we speak. And to bring it
Yeah,
to
I
bring it
don't
back,
like living through history.
it's not we didn't choose this. Um,
No, what there's like a Yiddish expression, may you live in uninteresting times, and that's exactly
yes.
what you want.
Yes, and we did. For a nice little bit of time, we had some respite, but here we are. And I think history is cyclical. And I once heard someone say history doesn't always repeat itself, but it rhymes. And that made sense to me. It's just a different iteration. But
Hmm.
to get back to you, okay, let
That's
me
right.
just tell the audience how this came about. I just reached out to you and you just jumped in. You didn't say, how many years are you doing this? Who are you? Let me see your questions first. So I was like, wow, this woman is really kind. And my husband said, no, maybe, but she's also confident. So then I started to think to really be a good person, okay? To really, really be a kind person authentically, I think you have to have confidence. I really think it's a prerequisite, and everything else just doesn't hit. So thank you.
I think it's also that I'm older. I mean, honestly, I feel like why not talk to someone in Israel? It's fascinating and it's a two-way street. It's I'm you guys are so brave every single day and I don't know. It would never occur to me to ask for questions in advance because then it's just not as crackling a convo.
Yeah, it's not
It's
a
more
vibe.
canned, you know?
Yes, yes. And I think that's what people love about you. I think that's why we love your fashion and your really dark, awesome sense of humor. Can I just say, when you're not defending our homeland, you're hilarious. And the things that you find funny, I
Ugh.
mean, it's great. It's great. I so appreciate everything that you represent and that you are. Which brings me to, I know you lost your father, and I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
And yeah,
You're so sweet. Thank you.
yeah.
I miss him terribly, and it's been so, so hard. But I feel like, we did have as a family very dark humor, very macabre humor. I grew up in a household that like talked about death all the time. My mom's side's Holocaust survivors. My dad has like he had a really dark sense of humor and always talked about death. And I grew up on Woody Allen movies,
Hmm.
so I feel like I was pretty prepared for it. And we always have framed everything in complete gratitude for the time that we did have. I have
Hmm.
tattoos of Tempest Fugit and a clock. And, my dad on his deathbed was like, I had a great run. I'm still
Oh,
sharp as a tack and I'm 86. Like, I had a great run. I didn't raise you to fall apart and cry. I want you to go on. So he departed, leaving me a well of strength that even when I was like sobbing myself to sleep, I would draw upon it to fortify myself the next day. And I had no problem seeking counsel in the form of a grief counselor who was a lifeline for me. And my dad never believed in therapy, my mom, my brother, but like this grief counselor was a total godsend because she had a very grief specific lexicon to help me through and sent me during the holidays like a griever's bill of rights. Like you can get that of a party if you're feeling uncomfortable or
yes.
someone's annoying you or whatever. Because I feel like when you're really emotional and you feel pain of missing someone, it's kind of like skating on thin ice, and like the littlest thing will push you in,
Hmm. Hmm.
and things that might not tick you off, you just feel like you're hanging by that emotional thread. So
Yeah.
I feel like she gave me that safety net emotionally, and it was a godsend. So I highly recommend getting a grief counselor, if whether it's anticipatory grief because you're going to lose a terminally ill loved one, or just afterwards, or if you're just like feeling your way in the darkness and you want that lifeline. I really, really suggest it.
That is such beautiful advice. And no, first of all, they're from a different time. I don't think my parents or grandparents' generation ever would think about seeing a therapist. And thank God we have the tools to be able to do that. But I also think you can tell a lot about a person and how they leave this planet. And the fact that he said he had a good run, it speaks volumes. Like you can see that this guy lived his life and didn't want anyone to just sort of stop theirs because he left. Wow. Like, wow. Mr. Ari, huh? That's
Yeah,
amazing.
and he outlived both his brothers, including his twin brother, and he lost his little brother at 46. My mom's mom died at 47. Her sister died at 50. So I think he was very much like, look, he had friends die in horrible tragedies. One was stabbed to death, one was in a plane crash. So he's always carried that sense of good fortune, that time is the ultimate luxury, and that's really the only thing that matters. And,
Wow.
no one's on their deathbed saying, I wish I had worked more. It's about like time with your family and absorbing every second and appreciating every delicious meal or a night at theater or, a beautiful New York sunset, whatever it was, he would stop and sort of take it in. And I really think he was the ultimate, master of a life well lived. And I've taken so much from him about, appreciating that.
Well, that's my question. The things that you take from him, do you see yourself giving that to your kids?
Yes, 100%. We all talk about my dad all the time. And I'm really lucky because my kids are 21, almost 19 and 17. And so, they were my dad too. It wasn't like they didn't know him. They were so close to him and sought his counsel constantly. And so it's hard because I'm not spiritual. So sometimes people would try to make me feel better and be like, has he visited you yet? Because my dead mom came in the form of a cardinal and landed on my windowsill. And
Wow.
I'm like, that's nice.
Wow.
But
Wow.
that's like not my thing. It was a little bit hard because he hasn't, quote, visited me in my dreams or
Yeah.
anything. So That's tough. Like some people are looking for signs and feel like they're finding them, and that I've been told I'm like closed off from receiving them because I'm not a believer, but I do feel like I have him with me in the sense, not in like a ghost sense, but that I was so close with him that I know exactly what he would say. So
Mm.
if I'm in a crossroads or like a moment of distress, he'd be like, "Who
Yeah.
cares? We're all going to be dead in 40 years. We're not going to sweat the small stuff." I have
His voice
his
inside of
like
you.
little aphorisms. Yeah,
You know, it's so weird. Like, I consider myself a spiritual
totally.
person, and I don't believe in any of those signs. I don't believe in any cardinals sitting on my window, and I'm definitely not, I wouldn't say I'm not open. I mean, hey, anything is possible. When I think of spirituality, I think a lot about my Judaism. It's kind of like this like strong sense of identity. And I think that the word spirituality really got a bad rap. And that's no disrespect for anyone who is on a mountaintop doing their thing. But I think sometimes for me, spirituality really is I do my Shabbat candles or bedtimes with my kids. That's something that I feel is very spirit. And when I think of my grandparents, because that's my closest experience near death, yeah, that's a spiritual experience, and there's no dreams and there's nothing sort of metaphysical there at all. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is that words have sort of gotten kidnapped, and in reality, there are so many things to say about our regular everyday experience, like
No,
that
it's
sunset.
true. The spiritual idea, and I do feel like when I'm in synagogue, I feel something larger than myself. It's not about God, it's about like the tradition of the candle lighting, or when you see the Torah being passed down. And my rabbi always says, like, this Torah has been passed down for thousands of years through generations, and it's kind of a miracle. It's like hitting your 13-year-old. It's
Yeah.
just an amazing thing, and that makes me feel part of something higher than myself.
Hmm.
But again, it's not in the form of like spirits.
Right.
And you're right, spiritual, I think of like I charged a crystal under the moon. Like that's like a
Yeah.
Southern California like
Yes.
Reiki
That's
version,
West Coast spirituality.
whereas mine is more like a link to the past.
Yes, exactly right. My link to the past and how I raise my kids for the future. I hear helicopters right now. When you hear helicopters in Israel, something is going down, let me just say. So it's like, I prefer to not hear things, but hey,
Really?
yeah, here we are. You read a
When you
headline,
hear helicopters in New York, it just means there's traffic.
right, right. Some guy decided to go somewhere in the Hamptons. I know. It's a whole different world. Like I
We
would read the
have traffic
headlines.
helicopters every day. It's like chopper
Yeah.
four.
I know. Well, I'm
Yeah.
from Brooklyn. It's like, I stepped into this place and you're in the Middle East all of a sudden. And I'm surrounded by Americans, to be honest, where I live. But it's a whole other life. When you check your news, 5 minutes later, you see your own Air Force fly overhead to take care of what you just read. It's wild. It's
Crazy.
crazy. It's going down, and to live in a place where you're being defended by your friends' children, there's no words. There's no words. And that's why the posts that you put up, and I could list a whole
I
slew of
can't
names.
imagine. You guys are so brave.
I'm a lot less brave. I'm just sitting at home doing my thing. But yeah, it's definitely a privilege to live here. I feel very, very, very lucky. But I also feel that we're together. And I wonder if you feel this way. When there's someone around that is Jewish, for me, it's like automatic family. I'm not sure what it is, and I'm not sure I could put it into words. I'm like, oh yeah, they're like it feels like she's my first cousin or second cousin when we're behaving well. I should add, when we're behaving well. And I wonder if that's tribal or there really is a connection.
Feel a connection to you because I think you're normal, and but I do feel like the Jewish community here is pretty divided, and
Yeah.
I've been accused by Jews of being divisive because I criticized President Trump.
Hmm.
Know that he's quote good for Israel, but have daughters and I'm pro-choice, and they're
Yeah.
stripping away rights of my gay friends, and these state legislatures are going more and more Bible beating, and I believe in separation of church and state.
Yeah.
I mean, if you heard the rhetoric here, even though Israelis are generally pro-Trump, if you heard the rhetoric of how pro-Christian it is, and really it's getting like more and more evangelical, you have to understand like they're not wild about us here. Like they might,
I
it's
know.
not like,
I know. I always say it's much harder to be moderate than to be an extreme
right.
because
It's
once
the
you're
horseshoe
extreme,
theory of anti-Semitism.
yep, 100%. In Israel, it's so different because it's not so polarized. You have a parliamentary system, so you got 8% and 12%, and you could get to sort of. It's not a perfect system, don't get me wrong, but I find myself to be extremely culturally liberal not very political, but when it comes to Israel security, that's when I'm like hardcore right, you know? And those sensibilities don't exist in America in the same way. So it really is very different.
I agree.
You know, and expressing a political opinion is not divisive. Like, I don't understand when we stopped hearing from people we disagree with. I don't think people who are pro-Trump are Nazis, and I don't think people who are anti-Trump are hateful or crazy or it's a very strange time, you know, and that's why I love these conversations because I guarantee you we don't agree on everything, and it would be boring if we did. But you know, like you said, you're normal. That's all it is. It's not that deep. Let's just show up and try to be normal and hear each other out. Unless, of course, they're a terrorist
Yeah,
organization.
right. To me, there's no wiggle room there. There are weird, self-loathing Jews for whatever reason who want to play the good Jew, who like help the Nazis and strike down, Israel for defending itself. I mean, there's a million actors or high-profile people who have posted that they're mortified to be Jewish. There was a ceasefire on October 6th.
You know, and I have a hard time letting that slide in today's day and age when all information is available. You know, I also think it's a weird self-preservation because I think if, as a Jew, all of a sudden you feel like, well, those Hamas guys would probably like me and then I'm safe. I really think it's deep. This is like tremendous fear. And we're just coming through again, the same reason why you're fearless on social media or you're fearless in the job choices that you've taken or your fashion. It's the same thing, you know, if you're fearless, period. And I think that's being brave.
Yeah, I mean, I think about all the times that, oh, so I was gonna say, like, there were Jews who were for Hitler,
Yeah.
for, like, onto the train car you go. One grandparent, one
Mhm,
Jewish the
mhm,
Nuremberg law said one Jewish grandparent
mhm, mhm.
into the train car you go.
You know, you're raising children in this environment. And I think that you are actually more involved in sort of this Jewish slash non-Jewish world than I am. I am much more isolated from that sort of outside world. And I'm wondering, have your kids experienced anything that sort of rubbed you the wrong way in terms of being Jewish?
Yeah, so much, way more than my childhood.
Really?
Um, for starters, my son, as a small kid, as like a 9-year-old, had an anti-Semitic person in his class who said, God sent Hitler to kill the Jews because you nailed Jesus to the cross. And I went to the school because they did nothing. Like they literally did nothing. And I said to the head of the school, I don't understand that in the grade above, a black child was called the N word and the kid was expelled, and as he should be. But I was like, what's the difference? He's saying the
Yeah.
same thing to us. And he's like, well, it's just different. And I was like, how? I'd
Tell
love
me
to know.
how. I want to
And he's
know.
like, it's just different. So I pulled my kid out of the school, and I had just had a double mastectomy because I have like Jewish genes and I had a lump and whatever. I did like prophylactic and I was hysterically crying. And I remember my dad being like, look, you've been through a lot. You just had the surgery. I'm like, it's not the surgery. I didn't care about the surgery. I wasn't attached to my boobs. I never like showed cleavage.
Too
I was
classy.
hysterically crying because this kid said this to my son, and that made me cry more than going through the surgery. And I was like, I think in the darkest place of my life when that happened. And then I got him out, and we're in another school that's awesome. And then when October 7th happened, my daughter had, encampments in the school. But I have two girls and then my son.
Mhm.
They're both together, and my older daughter, they had all the encampments, and she just it was eating a huge square of matzah in a black tie gown and stepped over them and was like, you're trash, basically. It was just eating her matzah.
Wow.
Like what she told me is that the kids who were doing the encampments are actually total losers at her school. Like they just want to be part of something because they didn't get into any
Yep.
clubs,
Yep.
and they're just total zeros. And that actually, when confronted on video, they didn't have any answers about like what river, what sea. They just felt like they were finally part of something and wanted to yell and scream because they have angst for having like no friends.
Wow. Like, you know, your son's experience is so painful, whereas your daughter's experience sounded somewhat empowering. Like she was able to really call a spade and be like, I have your number and I have something inside of me. In other words, if she wasn't part of our tribe, she would not be in those encampments either, you know, and that's kind of cool. That's
Definitely not.
definitely not.
All three of my kids, because of this adversity, which is not constant. It was like these episodic little spurts.
Hmm.
But all three of them have such a strong Jewish identity. And I think it's because of these challenges. And since October 7th, I feel like both girls, when they got to college, sought out Chabad or Jewish friends, and they're way more into the Jewish community at school than I was. I never went to kosher kitchen. I didn't like roll with the Jews because they seemed like really ortho, and I just don't. I feel like more comfortable with just like regular atheist wasps, and so I feel like though my kids are not like that. They like really have sought out Shabbat dinners and are more into it. So I mean
Wow.
that's like a silver lining, and I'm
Yeah.
talking to you. This is a silver lining.
Yeah.
You
For
know,
me, it
I
is.
wouldn't have connected with people in Israel. I find it fascinating.
Hmm. I love that. How something so dark has something that comes out of it. October 7th was a day, and all of this generation, all these kids, I mean, I have five boys, okay? Three of whom are of army age, and they're not in it right now, but
Wow.
they're of that age. Yeah. And we go back to the States every summer, and I'm like, you guys, do you see a difference between you and your cousins or whatever? And this adversity is, yeah, it's this huge fast forward in maturity, in living a life of meaning, standing for something. And I love that. And I'm so proud of everyone on a college campus that feels their identity and feels strong and not ashamed. And I wanted to ask if you had advice, if anyone's listening now, and I know a lot of the people we're speaking to are on college campuses and they might feel isolated. Do you have any advice to share with them?
Yes, I would just say, double down, go seek out people like you, be part of a group, start observing Shabbat, not for God, but just for yourself and for, community ties. I just think it's really important. And not everyone's going to be your cup of tea per se. They might have political differences. I always think about, they say like five Jews, six opinions. Like,
Yeah.
we are an educated, difficult bunch, and that's not always easy. But I think sometimes, especially if you're reform and it might not be like your first bullet point of your identity, let it become higher up the list and go seek out relationships that like hold a mirror to the Jewish part of yourself.
Mhm.
And there is familiarity and coziness in people, even if they're really different from you. You're going to feel that overlap, and there is a warmth to it. It's really worth doing.
I love that. I wonder if the whole sense of humor thing, obviously, there are funny people everywhere. The Jewish people, though, could we for 1 second talk about how humor? I mean, my grandfather, who was like in Auschwitz for years, had his daughters killed, the whole thing. He came out of it, and maybe deep down, there was a part of him that was shut off. Fair. His sense of humor was on point all the time, constantly. And I wonder what's nature, but also, is that a way to cope?
It's definitely armor. If you don't laugh, you'll cry. Jews
Mhm.
have always used humor as armor, and I think it's yeah, it's a coping mechanism, but it's also just like taking life not so seriously. I
Right.
think it's, so complex, but being intelligent, you definitely use humor to get through the tough times and understand that, especially with the shadow of the Holocaust, as your grandfather had, that life is fleeting, it's precious, and you better laugh because, it's going to go away quickly, and you want to make the best of the time you have.
Yeah. I wonder, like let's just say your TV show, right? When you were sort of making jokes and the people kind of got the vibe that maybe it's about them, were they able to laugh at themselves? And I'm asking because not everyone's funny, and I don't think everyone should try to be funny because that's a disaster. But if you can't laugh at yourself, I get the ick. Like there's something just not right if you can't laugh along at that joke.
People actually, I don't think, recognize their own behavior, but they definitely recognize the scene of like a group of moms, or they're like, oh, that's so
Hmm.
and so. But no one was based on anyone particularly. It wasn't even a composite. It
Hmm.
was just like these types in New York on the Upper East Side. And so I think it just felt familiar to people. And that's very much, I think my new movie will be exactly like that, where it's like holding a funhouse mirror to influencers. And I think it's actually a very much of a Jewish joy movie. So I think you're gonna like it. It culminates in a B'nai Mitzvah.
Oh, how cute. Wait, when is this coming out? I'm so excited.
Probably the end of the year. It's called Influenced,
Oh, I love it.
and it's about an influencer who's miserable.
That's so great. You know, like when TikTok took a pause and like 2 minutes before everyone signed off, they were all crying, saying, I'm not really a healthcare professional. I lied. And then TikTok came back and they were like, oh
That's
no.
so funny.
It's
Just
great.
kidding, I am. Yeah. It's like when a plane is crashing and you say, I love you.
Whoops, wait, sorry. Yeah. Well, I have to ask you about your mom. Your mom looks like a queen. I know her name is Coco, and I saw the most beautiful drawing that Karl Lagerfeld drew of your parents, and it was just like I wanted to hang that in my home. And the ballerina and the whole thing. I don't think most of us have that experience, and I just wanted to like speak to that blessing of the amazing childhood, the flawed childhood we all had, but how fortunate that is to come from a home that at least looks like that.
I'm so lucky. I'm the luckiest person in the world. First of all, though, what's funny is that drawing that Carl made is of my dad and Coco Chanel,
Oh, the other
who
Coco.
was predeceased. Yeah, he wrote, I know there's another Coco in your life, but we've been together 10 years. Because it was when he was at Chanel for 10 years with Carl.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, my mom's baby nurse, her real name's Corinne. Her baby nurse named her Coco.
Oh,
And the owners of Chanel are Jewish, and the wife was actually like raised Orthodox and was very superstitious and thought it was a sign that my mom's name was Coco. So my dad always says, like, thank God you have that name. But yeah, my mom was raised Orthodox, sitting upstairs, kept kosher
hmm.
home, the whole
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then she married my dad, who's like a reform atheist.
Yeah,
So I didn't grow up in a kosher home. My dad like loved lobster and
yeah.
clams and whatever, but my mother was like very, very traditional and still is. Like she cooked for my brother and me every single night. She'd be in like a ball gown, headed to a black tie gala with oven mitts,
Oh my
ball gown
goodness.
and oven mitts, taking our dinner out of the oven. And just like such a amazing wife and mother.
Wow.
I don't cook at all, so I mean my husband's a good cook, but like she just did all of those like traditional cozy things and made
Hmm.
us feel so loved. And my dad also, like he worked really hard, but I just like picture him home for the news. So I don't know,
Yeah,
like now people work way crazier hours. Very traditional and super loving and don't go to bed angry. And like I really did have like a really idyllic childhood. They did travel a lot and there wasn't cell phones, so it's not like we talked on the phone. They would go to Paris and it was
yeah,
like, bye, see you in a week. But that's the only part that was like not traditional and sort
yeah,
of weird.
yeah,
But my mom's whole family was there and they would call like once during the non-long distance hours in
yeah.
the 80s. It was long distance hours. But yeah, I had a really, really lucky childhood. I mean, New York in the 70s and 80s was like not the safest, but
Hmm.
somehow we were allowed to walk around by ourselves at
Hmm.
8, which would never happen now. And my kids have cell phones and there's cameras
Yep,
everywhere. I mean,
yep.
it's really crazy looking back. I constantly say to them, like, how could you guys let me jump on the subway in third grade? I
Different
guess,
world.
I don't know. I was very free range. Yeah.
Seriously, same. We were all on the subways going in elementary school, a different world. With that said, I have to say with the traveling thing, so my parents were divorced since I'm young. And I always tell my kids, my husband and I do travel a lot together alone. And I don't even say the words, they subliminally know if mom and dad are best
Marriage is more
friends.
important. Yes,
Yes,
it's good for
we're
everybody.
exactly right. Everyone's better off. And they see it without me even saying it because thank God all of us got to see a way that we don't want to live. As opposed to for you guys, you all chose your own path, but you also have sort of role models. And I just think that's so valuable. And obviously, your mom let you be you because you're not Susie Homemaker and you're thriving. And to me, that's a sign of a good parent.
Yeah, they were such good parents. Although I will say, they didn't do me any favors in terms of like the perfect marriage thing because they had such a bubble. We never saw them fight.
Hmm.
I saw them fight only about my mom smoking, but like it seemed to me
Hmm.
as their daughter that they had like the perfect marriage
Hmm.
and never fought and no problems. So like when I had a normal partnership marriage that
Yeah.
wasn't very 1950s where I'm like cooking and cleaning and Harry's the breadwinner, like
Yeah.
we have more of an equal partnership.
Yeah.
I would say to them like, guys, I don't understand. Like, how did you not like mom doing all the woman stuff? But luckily, the time goes by and they're older. Like, we have to go on trips. Like, we hadn't left the kids in 10 years to go on even a weekend. And once we did it, we're like, we have to do this,
More
every six
often.
months.
Yes. It's such good
Yes.
advice. What you're saying is so valuable just for me, and I wonder for everyone else out there. Let me tell you why. Because I grew up in such a tumultuous environment, I was sort of doing backbends and stretching myself out so my kids would never see conflict. And what you're saying right now is maybe that's a bit much. Like maybe the conflict is healthy and maybe they need to see a bit of friction and humanity there. So I'm actually going to think about that for a minute. So thank you.
Sure. I don't know. Like my mom and dad who have gender roles. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
I don't know, maybe I would go crazy, but like, who knows? I
Who
don't know.
knows?
It's really fascinating though.
And there's no instruction book, and we're all trying our best. But you mentioned you're taking a trip with your daughter next week. For me, those trips with like that one kid, those are memories. I find them to be sacred time. And that's so cool you're doing that.
Yeah, I do it with all my kids. That's another tradition. So my girls were at Chapin, an all-girls school, and they had a father-daughter ski trip every year. So he would take the girls, and so I would take Fletch on some kind of like educational. We went to Washington, D.C., and then Philadelphia the next year and Baltimore the next year, and just like then of course I did like the mother-daughter trips. And because my mom's family is in Paris,
Yeah.
my daughter's doing her semester abroad there, and so I'm visiting her.
Oh my
But yeah,
God.
it was great. We moved her in and we're gonna pick her up.
We were just in France. We went skiing there. And it's just like, where I live, actually, I would say there's a ton of French Jews where I live. It's a much higher, yeah, you hear French more than you hear English here. And I'm learning so much from all these different cultures. I have friends now that are South African and British. Yeah, they're all Jews, fair, for the most part. Not all, but for the most part. But they're all from such
Yeah, but
different
it's different
backgrounds.
cultures.
Completely, Yemen and London and the whole thing. And it's not a thing. And they're marrying each other. And I love that melting pot of Judaism, because I grew up in an all girls school because I grew up in this sort of Orthodox world. And they would always talk about one day, and this was like this idea of a prophecy, if you will. They would say one day, Jews from all corners of the earth will come back to Israel. And to me, it sounded like this, like, fairy tale unicorn story. But kind of I'm seeing that happen, whether it was Ethiopia or Yemen or where I'm from in Brooklyn. And I find us, we're all in this little suburban city near Tel Aviv. And I'm sitting around sometimes and I'm like, wow, I had such a more homogenous childhood. This is so cool that my kids don't have to be a kind of Jew. They could be whatever they want. And that makes me so happy.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
I wish more people around the world knew that. There are people of color and you can't fix stupid.
There are way more people of color than the white men when it comes to the Jewish people. You walk down the street here, not to be silly, but you see a lot more brown and black than you see white in the Jewish community here. And people don't know, maybe they don't want to know, but in reality, demographically, that whole white colonizer thing it's so ridiculous. We went to a comedian here in Israel, and it's just like a complete narrative what's going on, but with such a great, one of his lines were, I'm so jealous of the self-awareness of my enemy. They keep saying we won and the whole place is flat. And, as a Jew, we're so self-critical and self-aware and it's so different,
Yeah, exactly.
and you're sitting in the audience and to laugh at the darkness again, to me, it lifts me up a little bit. And I wanted to ask you about the onslaught. You mentioned death threats, but also the news. Are you able to filter what affects you and how deeply it affects you?
Yeah, this time I have. I feel like when Trump won the first time, I was so traumatized. I was crying. I was in shock. Um, I feel like this time I was more fortified because my eyes were open. I knew it was a possibility. I was devastated. I just said to myself, okay, we got through the first time. We're going to get through this one. I still watch the news. I know a lot of people are like doing that ostrich thing of just putting their head in the sand. I'm not going to do that. I want to know what's going on so I can rebel against it if
Yeah.
need be. But I like having my eyes open. I don't think ignorance is bliss. I
Yeah.
want to know. However, I don't let it penetrate. I'm better at compartmentalizing as a
Yes.
tool, and I seek happiness. And I feel like my dad, one thing about my dad's death is like, I don't have him to call and say, like, can you believe this? Or what about that stupid Gaza AI video or whatever it is? But I know that he would say, like, you can't
Yeah.
let things get to you. This is your life.
Hmm.
Focus on the joy, focus on how lucky you are. Be grateful. Why pollute it with getting angry all the time? I don't want to be like locked in an angry skull. I'd rather process it
Right. So you use that fire as this engine instead of letting it sort of consume you on the inside. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Well
I love
said.
that. And you're not apathetic. You're really not. I've taken note as to the people who are speaking out and the people who really have no skin in the game, not affiliated, nothing to do with Judaism at all, and they're defending Israel. That's a hero. And if anyone had to ask themselves, where would you have been in, 1942? Now you know. Everyone's masks are off. And I find that to be kind of refreshing in this weirdly disturbing way. People aren't faking that much anymore. So at least I know who I'm dealing with, in every sense of the word. Any trips planned to Israel while you'll be in Europe? You want to make a detour?
I was just thinking I'm going to be in London and if we tacked something on, but I would want it to like serve a purpose and be helpful in some way. But my husband and I were talking about it because we haven't been since 10/7. We were actually there the year prior, but like we
Yeah.
just, yeah, it's not at the moment.
Hmm.
But again, like I really respect you guys because I don't know that my wiring as even though I'm a New Yorker who hears sirens all day long, I
Yeah.
don't know that I'm like hardwired the way you are to be like, oh, a helicopter, I'll just go to my shelter or whatever. And like I was texting with a friend who was in her bomb shelter in Israel, and I was like, are you freaking out? And she's like, no,
Yeah.
she's like pretty chill. And my son went to summer camp in Israel and sleepaway camp, and he's still talking to all his friends on
Wow.
WhatsApp. And they'll be like, "Yeah, I'm in my bomb shelter," and he's like, "I can't believe their life. Like, how do they not have PTSD?" I feel like my family would be, nervous about that, but people just keep telling us like it's not like that. Certainly not in Tel Aviv.
It's really not. It's very weird. I think that, in the that first night, though, let me tell you, on October 7th, that day, we had a bunch of guests because it was this Jewish holiday called Simchat Torah, and we just had
Right. Of
company.
course.
And, we had the phone on in the pantry and we kept checking on what's going on and what's going on. And I told everyone, don't leave. And we had sleepover guests that stayed in our house. It was like Master Chef for 4 days where all we did was cook and hang out together. And those days were hard. But then I realized the more afraid I am, the more they're terrorizing me wherever I am. And I refuse to be that person. So just like you described that fire consumed us. And that anger was
Right.
directed in the right spot, and there's, I wouldn't say a high from being angry, but there's an energy that you get from that when it's appropriated properly. So that's kind of
Yeah.
where we're at. We pray for quiet days, but in the good sense, quiet because we did the right thing and we made good choices for our grandchildren, not because we kicked the can. However that looks, I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I'm excited when I hear your kids finding their Jewish roots in whatever shape or form. I am not one who thinks everyone has to be Jewish in one way, and I think all of us should find our connection to our people in our own unique way. And if that was the case, it would be more attractive to everyone else.
Exactly right.
I got some rapid fire questions. All right.
Okay, great. I love those.
You love those? Okay. I hope you like mine. Okay. Number one, vacation choice. Would you choose city views, mountain views, or ocean view?
City views.
I knew it. I knew it. Okay.
I
Next.
love traveling to other cities.
Everything about you, even structurally, the way you dress, scream city views. And to me, I just see Amsterdam. I don't know. That's like kind of that like vibe, which is,
Yeah, I love Amsterdam, but now they have so many like Arabs terrorizing Jews. No thanks.
can I tell you? Okay, I went to Amsterdam within a 2 to 3 year span, and the first time it was all like bells and whistles. The second time I went, I got a lot of looks because my husband's got a beard, but he wore a cap. But it's obvious, when you know, you know. I felt very uncomfortable at every bodega I passed by, and this wasn't me being silly. Like there was a valid concern there, and I said, I think they just killed Amsterdam for me. And then, 2 years later, that pogrom happened. So yeah, no thanks. Okay, but they still have sick taste. Next, okay, okay. An hour with someone, dead or alive. What would you talk about, and who would it be?
Yeah, without a doubt, my dad. Even though I know what he would say for most of them, I just like miss him and would love to hear his voice. And I haven't had like dreams or anything.
That's so beautiful. I hope all of us have people in our lives that would pick us when we're no longer here, because that means something, the more you're missed. That's a good footprint on this world. Last question
Yeah.
for you, Jill. And again, you've been so amazing to give your time to someone you don't know.
Sure.
Yes.
It's like
Well,
so nice
thank
to
you.
talk to you.
I actually feel the same way, and I knew that we would vibe. I had no doubt, but I want to spread that cool girl energy where you're confident enough to not ask too many questions and you jump in. I think that's something that is worth admiring. But my last question is, okay, so in the Jewish tradition, but I think in every religion, and it gets real weird when you start to think about how people see this sort of like how the world should not end, but what people are waiting for. And the apocalypse freaks me out. The strange Sharia law thing freaks me out. And in Judaism, I find it to be very non-specific and almost like very vague of what are we hoping this world gets to. And I love that. I love that it's open for interpretation. And I wanted to know from you if you could live in sort of this perfected world, what would that mean to you or what would that look like?
I feel like it would just be the continuation of like all things that I find joyful. I mean, I feel like Jewish people ultimately they just want to be left alone and have their community, their family, and they love and they love family. Like that to me is such a privilege to just like have joy and Jewish joy and filch happiness out of the time that we have.
Yeah.
So ultimately it would be a civilization where there aren't as many wars or like, totalitarian regimes and dictators or even quote free election.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is just, as you said, history rhymes. There is a tribalism that is innate in human nature where people are going to fear the unfamiliar and hate the opposite. And I don't know that we can get away from that. I think women would help if they were in more leadership positions.
Yes, yes,
And
yes, yes.
it's still probably a ways off till we have a woman in charge over here in the United States. But I mean, you guys had one, but
A long time
I
ago,
feel
yes.
like a civilization that can inch towards more harmony with more equality without the pendulum swinging too far right and left. That I think the harmony will exist in the middle, and the silent majority has to speak up more because it's really the fringes who are the most vociferous.
Oh, yeah. I could not agree more. Jill, you are a strong, loud, hilarious voice out there. And I pray that you continue doing what you're doing because, again, you don't realize the people you're reaching and the people you're comforting in all places. So, really, thank you. I admire you. I think that you are a very important human for our people, but also for the planet. So keep doing what you're doing. Keep cracking us up. I'm
Gosh.
Jill, you're awesome. When you come to Israel, we're going to hang out, and I feel very, very grateful to you. Thank you guys for listening, and we will be back soon. Thank you, Jill. Hey again, guys. If you like what you're hearing, please tell your parents, your siblings, your friends, your spouse, whomever, so we can really build a community of people who just want to grow and hang out together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us wherever you get your podcasts or social media so you can be part of the conversation.